Are we
How are
gonna
you?
do this? Are we gonna do that for real? I'm good. I'm good. But I mean,
Yeah.
are you? Is this your debutante? Are you going full
Uh,
face? Or are we
yeah,
still gonna
yeah, yeah.
fox you up? Okay.
I don't. I'm not working for anyone, so I'm just going to turn the volume up. I'm not working for anyone, so yeah. And yeah, I guess Angus Fox, but my name is out there, and I'm happy to be. Like, I don't want two names. It feels a bit they them.
This is the problem with internet branding when you go from anon to person, then the branding's broken because then we have Angus Fox and then like Tulip slash Richie. It's like, oh,
Like Tillich
Angus.
such Richie, like Carl Benjamin Sargon of Akkad, but I don't know that I'm going to be doing. I don't know if this is branding so much. It's just yeah. Like I'm not working for anyone anymore, and I'm not doing any paid work anymore to do with gender at all, or to do with anything. Um, so it's kind of like less critical.
Wait, did you like bet? Was there like a Deadpool on the Queen's like time of death, and you just like you cashed out on that? You just knew the hour and the day.
No, no,
Okay.
I didn't even watch the funeral, um, which I guess I should have because it's like once in a lifetime. I don't know. I'll watch the coronation. I feel like I think I have to watch the coronation. And there's a beautiful piece of music which is part of the coronation called Zadok the Priest. And it's a really beautiful piece of music and choral music. And like you never hear it apart from at a coronation. So it's kind of like Halley's Comet almost. Like you kind of have to just go outside and look at it no matter what you think. So,
Huh.
but I didn't, you know,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, God,
So
God
I
save the king.
thought, God save the king. I sent for your audience's knowledge, I sent you a pretty weird email. Like, hi, do you want to chat?
And
I'm happy to talk about why, but also not if you don't want. And you were just like, yeah, okay.
Stella O'Malley said that you had some salacious story to tell. So I
He's
mean,
shot my fox. Stella
what?
O'Malley has shot my fox. She's stolen my thunder. That's what you're telling me.
No, she prepared the ground for you. She John the Baptist you. She
Okay, I
christened
don't
you.
know what that means because I'm less Christian than you. You need to explain what John the Baptisting is.
He like went out into the desert and started like shouting and throwing people into the river and saying that Christ is going to come.
Oh, okay. It's difficult to imagine Stella throwing people into the river and saying Christ is going to come, but okay, cool. Yeah, well, so I wanted to talk to you about uh, so the last time I was on your show, the last times I was on your show, I wasn't anonymous. And so it's a bit more me centered than before, because other times I was talking about other people. And then why I don't care anymore about being anonymous. So you can kind of, they're quite different conversations and you can just have at it.
Well, let's lay the groundwork because we met over and we spoke about your work investigating parents of ROGD boys or trans
Mhm.
identified boys. And
Mhm.
you did a series of essays for Quillette. And then you
Yes.
were a founding member, or you were in the very beginning of Genspect.
I wasn't in the very, very, very beginning. No, I wasn't a founding member. I was a kind of in after a couple of months member.
Okay, but you were consultant. Huh?
I was kind of the general manager, and I did a huge amount with web development, imagery, wordsmithery, branding, strategy, that kind of thing. So one of the things people don't know is I live 25 minutes from Stella. I live in Ireland, and
25 minutes by horse, or do you guys ride eagles around?
no, by dragon. Don't be so
Okay.
patronizing. By car. And so that was a complete coincidence because we both happened to live in the same middle of nowhere. So that's how I kind of, and I just went to her house after I wrote the Quillette piece. And then she was like, oh, the Quillette piece is really, really good. And I was like, can I join Genspect? And she's like, no. And I just kept on asking. And then she said, yes. So, yeah.
Could you give me
Yeah,
1 minute? I forgot my coffee. It's just right outside the door.
sure.
I want some.
Sweetheart, why don't you go to bed? Go into your bed. Go on. No, 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 don't come to me. Go to your bed. Go away. Good girl. Go on, all the way. All the way, Lucra. Sorry, hi.
She down?
As soon as I do anything, she's just like activates. It's like they're both. Can you hear the claws on the floor?
Not so much, no.
Okay, that's all right. I can hear. I find them incredibly intrusive, but
Huh.
hey.
But not enough to get some oriental carpets thrown down on the floor.
No, that's just too much effort.
Yeah,
That's too much effort.
you just suffer.
Yeah, just suffer. So what was I saying?
So you and Stella hooked up, and you were knocking on the door of her heart over and over, just like Jesus. You're just knocking on the door, knocking on the door. Eventually, she lets you in.
Yeah. No, it didn't actually take that long. And that was kind of, was it April or was it May? It was sometime around that. Genspect launched in June. Um, and I just kind of, partly because we live close to one another and partly because we get on so well. We're very, very good. We're very, very close friends. So it kind of just fell into, and so a lot of the discussions we would be having about where we see things going kind of walks around rural Ireland together, like little lanes. Yeah, that's why we would be discussing that. And then, so it launched June the 18th, and then I left.
Of 2021?
Yeah, that was 2021. And then I left at the end of June or the beginning of July of 2022. So I was in for a year, basically. Yeah.
Proud of that work?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
What's the content of Genspect, just for anybody tuning in?
So it's a campaign organization which wants a more rational approach to this gender issue, a more moderate approach that wants to be founded on concepts like, let's talk to one another as normal human beings rather than screeching that we're killing one another. It believes that medicalization, so like taking a hormone, if you identify as trans, that taking hormones and having surgery is not something which should be available to at least 25. And then beyond that, there's a kind of wide range of opinion in there because there are people in there who are trans and who are detrans. And I mean, the thrust of it was started with parents who kind of looking at their kids' decisions and thinking, yeah, not certain about that. But then other people as well, like, so you've got the detrans people and trans people who are like, oh, I'm not sure about what's going on. And then other campaigners who joined more recently, like people who are concerned about over pharmacalization, like the plastic surgery industry and how that plays into all of this genital surgery and profits and blah, blah, blah. And I'm really proud of it because it did that. It brought together different people, often people who have a very good reason to be skeptical of any organization because they've kind of been screwed over, frankly, by organizations. And I'm proud. This is a bit of a weird way to put it, but I'm proud of it tonally. I think we managed, and without me, it is continuing to look tonally where we want to be. It looks positive. It's no good looking like you're at the edge of society going, oh my God, the world is burning down. Even if you think that, it doesn't work. So when I redesigned the website, in my head, I was like, if there was like an accountant from Jakarta who spoke no English at all, I would want them to look at this website and think, this is the same centrist appeal as Stonewall, but just coming from the other direction, which they wouldn't even understand if they spoke no English. I wanted it to look centrist because I think we're in the center. I think what Genspect is arguing for is basically where the average person would be, which is yeah, people who've transitioned need fundamental rights. It's not okay to mock them simply for having transitioned. But at the same time, some of the stuff that's going on these hospitals is monstrous and needs to be stopped. So, and I think Genspect's been very successful for a number of reasons. And the one I can lay most claim to, I think, is the use of graphics and imagery to kind of make us look like we're not at the fringe of society saying the world is burning. We're actually kind of saying, hi, we're here, we're a resource, we're pushing for a certain thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's also a genuinely fabulous community of people because it is, paradoxically enough, it's incredibly diverse. It's international. It's gay people, straight people, parents, detransitioners, doctors. So, and people from the left, and people from the right, and people from the center, and religious and irreligious. And that actually is incredibly useful when you're working if it can be managed, which it was in Genspect, because you can bounce ideas off people. You can say, okay,
Yeah.
well, this sounds fine to me, but how's that going to fly with people whose primary newspaper source is the Washington Post, or whose primary news source is Fox, or whose primary whatever, do you know? So you can actually, when you've got viewpoint diversity, it's really quite useful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And you undertook this work with knowledge of the risk for your own personal life, because entering into this with the radical trans rights activists and their vendetta toward anybody who wants to shed
Yeah.
light or be critical or
Yeah.
disagree with them.
Yeah.
We've seen a pattern of what's colloquially called cancel culture, but kind of turned up.
But I don't care anymore.
Okay. You don't care anymore.
No.
You're a man with nothing to lose, the most dangerous type of man.
Is this the bit where somebody goes do 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 do? Yeah, kind of. Yeah, I'm not that bothered about TRAs. Like whatever. I was. Yeah, definitely. And I was also concerned because at the time, like when I wrote what I wrote, I genuinely thought the pandemic was just going to kind of be a break for academia. Academia would go right back to the way it was. I thought at some point in the future I'd like to go back into university lecturing because I was really good at university lecturing. It's one of the only things I'm good at. So I kind of thought that's going to be impossible if there are three they thems screeching at me, which is technically six people. That's a lot of people, and it's going to be a nightmare, and I'm not going to be able to get back in.
Yeah.
But again, I don't really care now.
So now that you're showing some amount of your cards, you mentioned university lecturing.
Yes,
What's your Babel thing? What do you?
what was my field?
Yeah.
Well, linguistics, and
Oh.
then, but the thing that so I lectured in linguistics, but then I also taught very, very advanced English. The more advanced, the better. So there's a kind of in Europe, there's this system where you grade how good you are in fluency in languages, and I really liked the top, like getting you from the penultimate grade to the ultimate grade, and I was very good at that. So that was working with most of the people I was teaching would have been PhDs. And then I also did a lot of work with like some weird and wacky people, a lot of CEOs or diplomats or stuff like that, where I did very, very in-depth accent production. So I would start with a Russian who speaks like this, and after a year, presumably they were slightly less Russian sounding.
Huh.
Yeah. So there were kind of all sorts of things where it's like this could make life harder, you know? Yeah.
So you're a voice coach, kind of, in certain respects.
Yeah, more kind of, but not exactly, not like somebody could do with Margaret Thatcher. I mean, I probably could. I've got the knowledge to do that kind of thing. Somebody actually did make a joke that, like, because we were talking about somebody who's also a linguist, we were talking about some in-depth matter, and they were like, you do know that you could provide voice classes to female to male trans people because there's a big challenge in passing as male.
Yeah.
Yeah, which so I probably could with if I brushed up a bit. Yeah.
Hmm. Why linguistics? How did you get into that? Were you just like sitting around on a dock and somebody threw a volume of Noam Chomsky at your head and it fell in your lap and you just.
Can't believe you said Noam Chomsky. Um, no, I was always in love with it. I was just in love with it. In love with it. Um, I did the first year. I did Spanish and linguistics, and I was like, "Why am I learning Spanish? I'm completely bored. I don't. I'm not interested in learning a language. I tend to learn a language for a year and then just move on. I'm interested in language,
Huh.
um, but I mean, you've got to be interested to do it because it's not a good degree in terms of earning potential unless you are one of the lucky ones. If you consider it luck that you go and work for Google or something, then
Hmm.
it's not. Yeah,
Hmm.
it's very interesting, but it's not like a winning. It's not a STEM subject.
Okay. What are some of the main like theories that you based your work on, or were you just kind of a jack of all trades? Because I know there's a lot of different semantic and
Well, I was teaching.
semiotic.
I was teaching introductory, so it was jack of all was what I was teaching,
Okay. Yeah.
and then I've still got a thesis which I need. Well, I've still got a 60-page document which I need to work out whether that's a thesis, which has been going on for an embarrassment of
Oh,
time.
yeah.
Yeah.
A queen's age.
A queen's age. Yeah. Maybe not quite that long, but nearly. Um, but what I was teaching was quite generalist.
And what's your thesis on, or the domain? I'm just really interested in it,
No,
like
no, 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 no.
semantics,
It's just
semiotics.
incredibly nerdy. It's nothing to
No,
do
come
with.
on. I just spent like an hour talking about fallopian tubes yesterday.
Okay, so it's on the consonant sounds of Proto-Indo-European. And the glaze falls
No,
down.
no. Like, what's one word that you do you trace like one word and how
Well,
it?
you trace. Okay, so lots of people have done lots of work for many, many decades of um, tracing lots of words. So saying, okay, well, what do we think the word for night was? What do we think the word for moon was? What do we think the word for king was? Blah blah blah. Um, and we've got loads of answers. The problem is the answers all fit into a system which doesn't make sense. And this is a problem that was first observed. Oh, I forget. It's like 100 years ago or something. That the sound system we reconstruct for Proto-Indo-European makes sense in terms of okay, so here's the English word, here's the Irish word, here's the Russian word, blah, 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 but it doesn't make sense because that sound system doesn't occur anywhere in the entire world out of the world's 6,000 languages, arguably. And there are people who disagree with that. And so it's one of those things like, how in mathematics, there'll be some problem that somebody discovered in the 15th century and like 3,000 people have tried to solve it.
Yeah.
It's like a cliche. I must be the 500th person to throw my brain at this.
So, in layman's terms, the language that was constructed by studying the confluence of all these various words, once you get to the root, this
Mhm.
Proto-Indo-European, it doesn't make sense in and of itself.
It would just be very, very unusual. And it's very, very difficult for biological reasons. It's very, very difficult to argue that that could be a stable language, i.e. a language that lasted many generations. It could have been a very brief phase, but that kind of also doesn't make sense because we know that each group that left and became its own daughter society, they didn't all just like have a fight and then like one November say, screw this. That happened over many, many years. So how it doesn't really make sense for it to be an unstable, temporary 1 or 2 generation system that covers such a large number of languages.
Yeah.
So then some Russians and some Americans, there was kind of like a mini space race, which, sorry, the Russians won in 1972. They were the first people to try and solve this. And then some Americans said the exact same thing in 1973. And then the whole stack of people have weighed in.
And nobody's like tied the knot, the string theory of Proto-Indo-European.
No, and I'm not sure I'll be able to.
Yeah.
Because the problem I've got is I've got a good literature review and I've got a great hunch and I've
Yeah.
not really got anything in the way of proof.
Okay.
So I need to establish what my proof, where I would find my proof.
Oh, fascinating. Okay. And this isn't just a nerdy thing because this is anthropological. This is historical. This kind of
Oh
shows
yeah,
the root of culture in
it's
the
not
West.
that controversial anymore to argue that possibly Indo-European languages and the Proto-Indo-European could have been related to Uralic, which is like Finnish, Hungarian, and so forth. That's becoming less controversial. And yeah, the thesis I'm arguing would probably play into that and would suggest, like, yeah, maybe there is a link there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I read at one point that it was probably facilitated by a technology of sorts, being like horses. Like these people who rode horses were able to
Well,
kind of
that was the
conquer.
spread of the Proto-Indo-Europeans
Yeah.
over the steppe, such a large, like
Yeah.
Ukraine, Russia, that whole area. Yeah, and their success
Yeah.
as a displacing force, because of course they displaced. Europe had people in it, right? Like the Basque, for example, and they
Yeah.
were kind of pushed up into the mountains or whatnot.
Oh, crap. We get colonized.
Over and over again. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why the whole colonization thing sounds so weird from when it comes from an American perspective, because if you're like a paleolinguist or a historical linguist and you're like literally everyone colonized the last person, it's like bam,
Yeah.
bam, bam.
Yeah.
Each one.
There's no zero indigenous population. Like,
Well, you could argue there was one, yeah, the first people there, whoever they were. But I mean, even there, do we know? Because were they not just clubbed to death so that the next lot stole their goats and
yeah.
wow.
Okay. Here we go. So, with regard to the gender ideology, right? This colonizing force that's kind of clubbing people over the heads and sweeping through. There's something infectious. I keep on returning to this month or this season about why is gender of all the concepts so infectious? It could have been anything, but gender just captures the imagination, and maybe it captures the imagination specifically of white, affluent, waspy kind of
Mhm.
white people at this point. And there's a lot of different theories around that, and about the oppression Olympics. How do you gain cred as a kid if you're just normal while you queer yourself? And there's
Yeah.
those different forces, and then feminism and men's rights and the battle of the sexes has kind of just gotten to this messy place where we don't have a stable form of masculinity to give to the sons, or a stable form of femininity to celebrate with our daughters. And so there's a lot of displacement, but there's also a positive thing about gender, I think, that is mythological or symbolic or archetypal, that is kind of like feeding and pulsing at the heart of this. That's just kind of a theory.
Oh yeah, I think that it's a big problem when people do this stupid. It really is. I'm sorry, it is stupid. Like, there's no such thing as trans. If we just stop saying it, it'll all go away. What are you talking about? Like, these things are inherently very, very interesting anyway. What it is to be a man and what it is to be a woman beyond. I'm not entirely determined as a man by my biology. There's other stuff going on. It's culturally sensitive. It would be different for me if I were Japanese. And a feeling of being a stranger in your own sex. You can call it gender dysphoria, or you can call it, I mean, sometimes it's more like a dysmorphic thing, or even a bodily integrity disorder thing, or whatever. That's real. That's real. I had that. And I had literally never heard the word trans. Like the idea that's only happening because of the woke teachers and libs of TikTok. I'm sorry, this is deranged. So it is interesting.
Yeah.
And it's really counterproductive to do this kind of like, if we just stop saying gender and we just stop saying trans, this will all go away. Because the kids doing this, it's meaningful to them.
Mm.
It's really meaningful to them. Sometimes for bad reasons, which is that they've gone from having no friends to a bunch of friends, and therefore they're wrongly associating it with being popular. And
Mm.
actually, they're not your friends if it's conditional on you being trans. But sometimes for very normal reasons, like, when you're 18, you are kind of obsessed with who you are.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
kind of are. And that, at the minute, what's scary is it's going into two things: the pharmaceutical surgical stuff, but then I would also argue the anti-family. anti-parent and in particular anti-mother stuff,
Hmm.
because that is breaking people,
Hmm.
people I know, people I love.
Hmm. Hmm. And that anti-family aspect to it is incredibly political. If you can
Yeah,
destabilize the bonds and the structures of family, you have a bunch of atomized people that are incredibly easy to control or at least weak to
yeah, yeah,
resist a unified
and
will.
very isolated, and then often also dependent on the state in some way, whether it's payment of rent, whether it's paying for an operation or for certain
Or just
hormones.
affirmation, right?
Yeah,
Just some
yeah.
sort of spiritual guidance or emotional meaning.
And I wrote about a lot of families, and it's interesting because here we are when we're September, and a lot of those families in the last month, 2 months, literally just the last period, have all experienced, not I can't say all, a lot of them have experienced the same thing, which is betrayal. That a lot of these boys spent 6 months kind of just stringing them along and being like, oh, you're right. It's kind of a bit regressive because like women shouldn't just be in the kitchen. And the mothers were like, oh, finally. And then they get to 18 and leave a note saying, it means some pretty awful stuff. Some pretty awful stuff. And I mean, in different ways, like 5 people, I would say, in the last 2 months that I know really quite well who've experienced some iteration of the same thing, which is the kid just doing something which is paradoxically pretty alpha male, kind of beta version of alpha male, but like
Hmm.
pretty ballsy move. And it's not nice.
What do you mean? Let's just qualify alpha male, like very extreme, very severing, very.
Yeah. And very much like this is what I want to do, and I'm not interested in anyone else.
Yeah.
I am the captain. This is what will happen in all of our lives.
Mhm.
Goodbye.
Yeah.
Nasty, I would say, nasty.
Yeah. Well, why do you think that that pattern has occurred in concert? Sort of like
I think
something.
it's partly September syndrome. I think some of them, a lot of them were the same cohort, the boys whose mothers I talked to, so they were all hit 18 at the same, now not a lot, but some of them have hit 18 at the same point. I also think September in general, for a lot of people, even if it's not your first, even if you're not at school or you're not at college, there's still a sense of like, what am I doing? What do the next few months hold? And
Yeah.
so, and we know that with a lot of these young people who are very fixated on medicalization and very convinced that their parents are bigots for not wanting that, that there is this kind of cycle, the sort of action, euphoria, dysphoria, inaction, action, euphoria, dysphoria, inaction cycle,
Hmm.
which I think Sinead has spoken about quite eloquently. And I think Michelle, some nuance please, has spoken about really nicely as well, that you get into these loops of behavior. Yeah.
Hmm.
Mm.
And they can sync up seasonally.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, and I also think things in America are just so polarized that it's very difficult, I think, for young people to fashion any space in the center ground. I think it's almost impossible now. That you know,
Yeah.
yeah, bit bleak. Sorry.
Yeah. No, it is. And yeah, the narrowing choice, even if you're not a radical, you have to be, because you have to be completely on board with something or you're a bigot. So basically,
It's not all bad news. There's one mom I wrote about, her son just stopped talking about it, and after a year of like, oh God, do I say it? She finally did it, and she was like, "So, how's things like with the gender?" And he was just like, "Cringe! Don't even talk to me about it." Just so
yeah.
there are kids who come through, and they're like, And he's so at the minute he's embarrassed and it's cringe. But then you think in 5 years' time he might look back and be like, well,
Hmm.
whatever, you know. And he's still got his, he's still intact,
Mhm.
you know. So yeah.
So you left Genspect.
Yes, so I left all because I was doing a bit of work for just a small bit of work for GETA, Gender Exploratory Therapy Association, and I was doing small bits of work for Wider Lens as well, and I stopped
Okay.
everything.
Uh, may I ask why? Burnout? Your reset?
You know,
September syndrome?
so this kind of risks escalating quite quickly. I don't have a huge amount of time left to live. I'm sick. I'm really sick.
Hmm.
I thought I was sick, like, you know, in a kind of, oh God, I'm going to have to take pills way. And then a series of things have happened. And it's very difficult to say. I've got like extremely good care and they correctly won't give you numbers or so the numbers they give you, you have to kind of read between the lines. But 85% of people who have my situation don't live 10 years. Um, Now, my consultant, who's very good, one of my two excellent consultants, would kick my ass and say, you're not 85% of people. And I'm a lot younger than, so I have stage three bowel cancer. And I'm a lot younger than most people who have stage three bowel cancer. So you could look at that 85% and say, who cares? That's not me. Um, because, for example, some of those people might be 93-year-olds who are offered chemotherapy and say, no, I'm 93, leave me alone.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the problem is, I have two big problems. The first problem is that, so I had a tumor and it got so big, it was the size of a Granny Smith apple, and it burst through my gut wall. And what they usually do when they take out a tumor is they take out the tumor and then they take out all of the bitchy friends around the tumor that look a bit sus. So they take out just kind of they resect an area of skin, even if it looks fine, as far as I understand it, and flesh and whatever around it. And they couldn't do that to me because when it went through my gut wall, it splintered into microscopic particles and embedded itself in the side of my body. So what that means is the only thing you can do, you can take it out and you can take out as much as you can see. But you can't take out the side of my body. I need it. Otherwise everything will fall out.
Hmm.
And so what you do is you do radiotherapy and chemotherapy, and you wait. And there will never be a day when anyone ever says you're better. It will just be each scan by scan by scan. So the first complexity is that when it perfed, which means when it went through my gut wall, it splintered and went into a place where it can't be taken out. So I have very well-meaning people saying, "Oh, my dad had cancer, but they got it all. It was massive, but they got it all. You'll be fine." And I don't have the heart to say, "Yeah, they can't get it all. They can't
Yeah.
even see it. All they can do is surmise that
Hmm.
the chance that I don't have cancer right now, it's technically possible, but it's negligible." So that's the first problem I have. And then the second problem I have is it turns out that there's a small group of people where if you give us chemotherapy, we have a heart attack. So I had a heart attack. I had round one of chemotherapy, and then I had a full STEMI, which is like kind of like a three-course dinner of heart attacks.
Hmm.
Um, so it's not clear I can have chemotherapy. So I have radiotherapy, and then I'm going to have
Okay.
a consultation about whether I can have chemotherapy. And there are all sorts of numbers. But I said to my other consultant, who's also excellent, like my understanding is there are three kind of outcomes here. One is I'm screwed soon. One is I'm screwed in a while, which is kind of like, what does that mean? It could mean 10 years. And one of them is that I'm not screwed because who knows?
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, so I've spent a lot of time in hospital and a lot of time in bed. I'm halfway through the recovery period from my heart attack, which is basically make a list of everything fun. You're not allowed to do it.
Hmm.
Um, can't drive, can't eat any nice food, can't drink, can't orgasm,
Hmm.
nothing. So I have to do another 2 weeks of that. And uh, the whole thing has caused me well, firstly, to give up work because I literally cannot be stressed. I, and the kind of work I was doing, it's not exactly viable when you're dealing with people who are quite in a lot of pain to say, I'm sorry, I'm feeling slightly stressed, I'm going to
Yeah.
leave. No,
Yeah.
it's not
Yeah.
really on. Um, and it's also caused me to reconsider just how I spend my time and how I live.
Technical question.
Yeah,
Chemo is like intravenous, and radio is that like laser ray where they go
yes.
whatever.
Chemo they put in. Are you squeamish?
No, I'm just getting emotional and being technical to.
Chemo they put in through. I
Okay.
don't know if you can see that they put this RoboCop thing under your skin,
Oh,
and which I now don't need because I don't. Well, I may or may not need, and then they put it in there to stop having to cannulate you.
yeah. Okay.
Do you want to hear something really like?
Sure.
So,
Can't be creepier than a fallopian tube. All due respect, mother of God, you know. But
so, so I had a heart attack. The heart attack lasted 5.5 hours.
what the?
That's quite normal. You see, this is really important that people see
Okay.
this.
Yeah.
Heart attacks are not like, on TV, it's like a guy and he goes and falls. That's not a
Yeah.
heart attack. That's very rarely a heart attack.
Okay.
Most heart attacks are very difficult to distinguish from panic attacks. Now, my partner is a paramedic, and paramedics are given lists of like features of certain conditions or events. So, like, what does an epileptic fit look like? And it would have
Yeah.
a list. One of the, I don't know why I find this funny, but because it's so true, one of the actual technical diagnostics for a heart attack is an impending sense of doom. That's a
Hmm.
quote. And that is exactly what it feels like.
Hmm.
And I had that for 5 hours. Then I had a stent, which is like a little kind of sprung device, which they put into the right part, and then it goes and holds your artery open. So the artery that failed is called the Widowmaker, somewhat sadistically. So and they put what they do. They're awake. You're awake. You're sedated, but you're awake, and they have to put the stent in the right part of your heart, and they put it in your body here, and they push it as you're awake to your heart, and then they go, yeah, yeah. And they can't really, they can do certain things to sedate you when you're having a heart attack, but they can't, they have to be very careful. So they basically have to try and keep you calm and tell you you're having a heart attack at the same time. And I had the best, I had this doctor called Pat. Pat, I've forgotten your surname, but he's from Cork. And he was just perfect. He was just perfect. So I had a number of episodes of tachycardia, which is where your heart rate's just kind of going like 70 beats per minute, and then it goes to 190, like that, like immediately. And that's terrifying. And the third time it happened, he came in. Sorry. Uh, the third time it happened, he came in and he said, I'm starting to dislike you. And it's like, and I said, yeah, I don't think much of you, to be honest. And it's having somebody who's
Hmm.
able to calm you down is
Yeah.
life saving. And I'm telling everyone I meet, like, if you ever have anything which is on the borderline and you're thinking, this is a panic attack, but I don't know, maybe it's go to hospital. Go to hospital. I nearly didn't go to hospital. Go to hospital. If you think you're having a panic attack / heart attack, treat it as a heart attack. I wouldn't be the kind of person who would be a hypochondriac, but with that, don't mess around.
Hmm.
Because I genuinely was in the ambulance feeling really embarrassed. Like, I think this isn't a panic attack. I think I'd know I'd be dead by now. Blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
And no, it was a full heart attack.
What caused you to decide to get into the ambulance? Were you talked to about it, or you just?
Yeah, I called a friend as soon as it started happening. I called a friend and talked about it with her.
Hmm.
So you have conversations. It's weird. You have conversations during your heart attack. It's really strange because you think of a heart attack as being like a sneeze, like it's a punctual event. And it's not. It's durative. It lasts
Oh, jeez.
ages.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And
And
so,
apparently that's particularly true of women. It's particularly true that female heart attacks don't get spotted because people are expecting and what they get is something that is described as a panic attack, and the woman is told, you know, you're very panicky, try and calm down.
and what was your mind doing during that 5 hour impending doom anxiety?
It's very strange. I couldn't sit still. I had to get up. I had to keep getting up for no reason at all, really. And I was kind of shouting at people quite a bit, sedate me, when I was in the hospital. They were very good. They just ignored me because you can't sedate somebody where you don't know what's going on. You just know they're presenting very strangely, you know. Um, and then they put me on morphine, and then I had the stent.
And how did you entertain yourself while watching, feeling this snaky thing weasel its way Frodo style into your heart?
Oh, I was out of I was groggy and I was on morphine. And I'm,
Okay.
to be honest, I'm not the nicest person on morphine.
Oh, really? You don't get like
I was
Kublai
very rude.
Khan, poetic, and
I was very rude to a nurse
oh no.
during the abdominal surgery. Because I'd just come round and I just said probably quite loudly, "You're the first woman who's touched my cock since my mum." And she was just mortified. And then so was I the next day. It just, yeah. Morphine's very strange. A lot of people seem to love it, and
Hmm.
so if I have to have another surgery, which I probably will, I mean, you can't dictate your drugs, but I'd like a conversation with them about alternatives to morphine. It really tripped me out. It
Hmm.
was really unpleasant.
Like emotionally, visually, like what do you mean tripped out?
Visually, but also just not knowing where I was, feeling
Yeah.
really frightened. Um, I kind of convinced myself that if I stopped breathing in threes, the world would end, which is the kind of thing you do on morphine. And then as soon as I had that thought, I tensed, and because I just had major abdominal surgery, then I was in a lot of pain because
Yeah.
they cut down, so they sever all your muscles. So it's very painful. Um, and that was like for 3 hours. I was just kind of lying there trying to count three, thinking the world will end if I don't get, you know. And so I'm hoping if I have to have surgery again, they can find me something which doesn't have that extreme effect, which I've heard it has on other people. It's a bloody strong drug.
You know, paradoxically, I I'm not speaking from personal experience, but I can imagine that being confronted with a terminal illness is kind of like a rebirth in a way. It's like, okay,
My
reset.
life has two halves, not equal halves,
Yeah,
but it's like before and after.
yeah,
There's some things I just don't care about at all
yeah.
now, at all. Like I was never particularly driven by money. I'm like my dad, as long as I've got enough, as long as it's not, you know. Um, whereas now I just don't remotely care at all about money. You know, as long as I don't run out, which I won't. I don't care about making money.
Yeah.
I care a lot more about my seeing my family. Um, my sister lives in New Zealand, so that's a long way to come, and it's very expensive. Um, so that's so I'm seeing her, which is nice, and yeah, everything really, everything. Because I'm going to give myself a fighting chance. So I've cleaned up a lot of my lifestyle and so on and so forth. I'm not going to fold, but I'm also not going to be a Californian about this and tell myself that if I love myself, everything will be fine,
Yeah.
because that's not really how life works.
Yeah.
So, in that context, you start thinking, what do I want to do? Who do I want to talk to? And I haven't got answers to all of those questions yet because this is all very recent.
June or July?
Yeah, June,
Yeah.
really, July. So my surgery was mid-July, and
Oh,
then the heart attack was 2 weeks and 2 days ago.
wow.
What are you thinking?
I don't know what to think. What do you think about life? Do you start thinking in absolute terms, like beginning and end, and
I'm thinking more about meaning, and I'm thinking more about like how much does it actually matter if there is an entity puppeteering us and providing meaning, or we're providing meaning for ourselves? Is it that critical a distinction? Because surely the more important thing is there meaning? I was in hospital with a guy. I don't want to say too much because I wouldn't want to, you know. And he was just. I felt like punching him in the face. He was so. My life is over. I'm just going to stay here and die. And I honestly, by the end of the 4 days, I was kind of. And this, he would bring the nurses over to tell them how everything was so awful that could they just roll him out of the window in a wheelchair? And on the last day, I almost felt like going over to him and saying, "Do you want me to kill you?" Like, because you obviously, you know, you've got to have more in your life than this, and
yeah,
you've got to have meaning. And I was very sorry for him because he was going through something very painful and quite humiliating bodily. But so was I,
hmm.
and he was about twice my age. So I was thinking, you've not that much to complain about. Like, I'm sorry it's happened to you. This is really bad. So I kind of made a decision, like, I can't be like that. I can't be like that. I can't be sitting in a bed crying. Jesus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what's meaning? What do you mean by meaning?
Well, what what would be a good way to spend time, like a meaningful way to spend time to myself, meaningful to myself and meaningful to other people. So going beyond just what do I want to do, although there's a big overlap, right, between what you want to do and what would provide meaning in your life. But so I kind of when I got sick, I was like, right, I just have to stop thinking about work. I can't think about work. I can't think about gender. I have to focus on myself. It's not appropriate for me to be talking about my own healthcare problems in front of people who have their own healthcare issues. Da, da, da. And and now I don't really know. I don't really know. I mean, I'm not going to go back into working in such a way that I was working. I need to doctor's orders be doing something which is zero stress, which kind of means on my own schedule entirely, right? So that could be writing. I don't know. Um,
Hmm.
I think that the stuff I did around gender was one of the best things I've done in my life. Even though it was quite small, what I did, it was only a couple of years, the last couple of years, but I think I helped a lot of people. So I think it would be very foolish to kind of bury that. Um, yeah.
Hmm. Well, speaking of that, what's the essence of your contribution? What's the wisdom that you've distilled
Well, I
from
don't
that?
feel like I ever said everything I want to say, partly because of anonymity. Um, I mean, certainly the technical stuff we've already spoken about, like, like design and da, 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 da. I think that I understand, I have some kind of understanding of some of these boys because I can see a lot of those traits and I think that's been useful to some of the parents to be able to speak to somebody who's kind of out the other end of it, but had a similar adolescent experience. Um, Often, by the way, it might make me less sympathetic to them. It's not that I'm automatically more sympathetic to the boys. It might make me less. Right? It kind of depends on what they're up to.
Okay. Yeah. 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 They
Yeah.
have this
So it's
debilitating condition and you've been there and they're like, wheel me out of the window, wheel me out of the window. And you're like, yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. There are things that there are just a couple of things where some of the mothers I know said, "Well, he said this to me," and I'm kind of thinking, "Yeah, yeah, yeah. Of course he did. Yeah, yeah. I know
Hmm.
what that is. Like I know what that behavior pattern is. Like, that's a kind of game that you're sort of playing in some way.
Hmm.
But then sometimes I would be more sympathetic. Um, you said something very interesting. Like of all of the male detranslationists you spoke to, there was this running theme of like not exactly not masculine enough, but too gentle too gentle to be a gentleman almost like there's that concept has been lost and I definitely think there's some truth in that. The problem is it gets horribly muddied up as soon as you introduce fetishistic AGP type behavior. It's very difficult to defend that, you know
Hmm.
and so you might have boys who have got both. They might be quite fetishistic in an AGP way. And they also might be people who struggle with thinking I'm not masculine enough. It's easy to fall into the trap of thinking over here you've got the timid, quivering homosexual transsexuals, and over here you've got the kind of baseball bat wielding AGPs. And I think it's a those groups exist, but I think there's also some strays in the middle.
I was contacted yesterday, I think, by I guess they're a non, but they're openly AGP and sissy porn and stuff like that, and very, very intelligent, which is
Uh-huh.
par for the course.
Yeah.
And they just wrote me like kind of a miniature screed about the trauma response of AGP is a sexualized trauma response and autogynephilia or fantasizing about being a woman or being turned into a woman as a trauma response, having usually owing to something to do with the mother, being abused by the mother in some way, and then kind of owning that or inverting that in a way through pornography, through
Yeah,
sexuality.
I would want a lot more information about the word abused in that thesis
What?
because I think, well, this person's saying to you it's a trauma response in relation to being abused by the mother, and that, yeah, what are we talking about? Are we talking about abused as in like repeatedly beaten? Are we talking about abused as in she that one time in the park she didn't do the thing? And
Oh yeah.
do you know what I mean? Because I'm I think I think you've got to be very, very careful about using the word abuse in the context of your parents or anyone's parents. I quite like that word to be narrow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a whole analogous thing about the word grooming, which I know you've weighed in on. Like, how do we want narrow or do we want broad? Because there are arguments in favor of keeping that word narrow and saying use some other word, and there are arguments against.
Well, every aspect of political language is has a layer of embedded in the meaning of any political term is
Yeah,
power. So it's no longer about truth or about definition. It's about power, and whoever can control the definition of groomer or racist or fetish or abuse gets to manipulate and obfuscate the truth in order to get their way.
But things don't have to be like that because you can have, let's say, okay, so let's say you're a massive monarchist, and let's say I'm a massive anti-monarchist Republican. Okay, so Republican. We can have a conversation where I call you a monarchist and you call me a Republican. Those aren't insults. They're descriptors of a landmark, a landscape. It's
Yeah.
like this is a hill, this is a hill. We're both using the same language. You could argue that the same about pro-choice and pro-life, that it's like they're positively framed. So you're offering, so I'm offering you, if you're pro-life, I'm offering you. Well, at least I'm granting that you're pro something.
Hmm.
With everything that's gone on with gender stuff and everything that's gone on with this so-called like populism since 2015, we don't have words which are actually neutral delineators. Nobody says I'm a populist. Nobody says I'm a transphobe. Nobody says I'm a member of the metropolitan elite. Nobody says I'm
Hmm.
politically correct. These are insults or they're boasts. So how are we going to do anything if we can't even?
Yeah.
Whereas you and I could have a discussion about the merits of constitutional monarchy or the demerits of a constitutional monarchy. We're speaking the same dialect. We're not even speaking the same dialect anymore. It's like, you know, if one group is saying trans, and I'm not offering a view on what words people should use. I'm not trying to tell people what words to use. I think that's enough of that. I'm just pointing out that if like there's one group who say trans girl to mean a girl who thinks she's a boy, and another group who say trans girl to mean a boy who thinks he's a girl. Like,
Yeah.
how are we even?
Yeah.
How are we even supposed to have a conversation?
Okay, linguist, going back to linguist,
Yeah.
whenever a society enters into a phase of radical politicization of language, like that's got to have happened, or maybe that's a particularly democratic phase, or something to do with modernism, liberalism, the frameworks that we're using. I just wonder historically what
Really.
happens.
I wouldn't necessarily be the right person to ask about that aspect of historical linguistics. I mean, I suppose the obvious go-to example would be the foundation of the Soviet Union. It would be the largest body of word and acronym creation stuff that went on. And we can certainly, I think, advance a fairly solid argument that that didn't end well. Beyond that, I don't know. I don't know if there's anyone doing that kind of research because
Well,
it's kind of like fact checkers. Like as soon as you say you're doing it, everyone's like biased. Shut up.
well, which isn't necessarily untrue. I am thinking of the Protestant Reformation and the pamphlet wars. The
Okay.
invention of the printing press and Martin Luther wresting control of theology out of the hands of the Catholic Church, and then that spiraling into a bunch of denominations.
Yeah, I don't know. I genuinely don't know how much that entailed in the sense of word creation or semantic shift of existing words. I mean, I know that was huge in terms of access to the written word and literacy and all of the rest of it. I wouldn't be able to tell you whether what went on. I mean, there was something I learned about. God, this is going back at university called the Inkhorn conspiracy,
Hmm.
which was in the century, 16th. And if my memory serves me correctly, the Inkhorn conspiracy was basically a bunch of well-to-do, hoity-toity English people didn't really like the lower orders using their language because, of course, historically in England, the upper classes would have used Norman French. And then that ended and everyone was speaking the same language. So a lot of there was a period of quite intensive importing of words from Greek and Italian, which were deliberate, and
Yeah.
French, which were deliberately kind of,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
like difficult to say and shibboleths, basically, to kind of mark you out as a member of the ruling class. And we
Well,
still use a lot of those words. I can't remember, but there's a load of them. There's loads of them.
yeah. The I don't know who I was listening to, but they maybe it was a Yarvin essay about how Latin was used as a barrier of entry to the elite class, to the elite schools, and now it's like these woke diversity statements are doing the same thing. You adopt this language, and it shows that you're a part of the elite.
there's a big there's a I think there's quite a clear line to be drawn between the Inca conspiracy and what's going on now. Because frankly, if you just kind of stepped off the bus or whatever and you're not really that informed, and somebody says, "Well, hold on a minute, you haven't used an X at the end of that word. What does that mean for non-binary people?" And you're like, "Okay, what? Why would I want an X? How would I even say that? You're going to have to remind me what non-binary is." Then you're out. You're out. Um, so yeah, there's a kind of gatekeeping um, going on, and it's worth bearing in mind that so the Norman conquest was 1066, the year 1066. It is still the case to this day that if you have a Norman surname, you are, I think, 20% more likely to go to university. So that's how long it takes to get rid of when you introduce these kinds of. Now, obviously, that's a slightly different example because we're not introducing a ruling class, but
Well,
mm,
yeah.
yeah.
Well, and the other problem with the transgender aspect of wokeness is that it can't reproduce itself, so it has to be constantly evangelizing, right? I think it was the Quakers in America. They were so purist with regard to, they were so open to everybody else's culture and so purist with regard to sex that they bred themselves out of existence. And you can't reproduce, you literally cannot reproduce with this ideology in terms of physical reproduction, and then the family unit is not stable enough. We'll see, I guess, with all of these trans parents, transing kids and stuff, we'll see if that can resolve into a stable family formation.
Something tells me they're not necessarily going to be the most stable family units that the planet has ever seen. Just a hunch. Um, Yeah, and the thing is, you can say the same about homosexuality, but of course, it doesn't matter because it's like it happens anyway. This is the whole point gay people are making. It's like we're not defending homosexuality. I'm not going to defend homosexuality any more than I defend nitrogen. It doesn't matter whether I like it to exist or not. It's there. Whereas with transition, you are making a choice. Now, there's an argument you don't choose your gender identity. I think it's wrong. I think you do choose a gender identity, but I
Well, part of the
can
appeal of a gender identity is that you're willing it into existence.
you're willing it into existence, you're curating it, and of course it's so bespoke now. Like my gender identity is whatever, the Linnaean system of pay, like pan romantic, blah blah blah. It's so fine grained. um so yeah, and so then you just get straight to the grooming argument, which is that these people are that this is that you need to have grooming in the broad sense of so schools pushing it, and in the narrow sense of sexual grooming in order for it to perpetuate.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
there she is. Groom me.
He he's an absolute he's not really like a cat, he's more like a dog. He's just so soft. You can just do whatever to him. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna get a new cat soon. We got one selected.
Very nice.
Yeah, looking forward
Yeah.
to it. One of our cats just walked off into the forest one morning. Never came back.
Oh, between my cancer and my heart attack, one of my cats walked off under somebody else's tire.
I'm so sorry.
Poor thing. I know. Yeah. On the other hand, she was a rescue cat. She was found in the middle of the road, so she got 18 months. Do you know what I mean? She got an extra 18 months of life out of me, so I'm not going to feel too bad about it. Yeah, I'm not having the best year, I have to say.
Yeah, you got some blows that you're absorbing right now. Um, Forgive me for going here. I'm just curious. And I don't mean to be flippant and all, but, facing death and the way to be completely blunt, facing death. I
Mhm.
guess you already mentioned it. You don't know if it's necessary for there to be an entity that's dispensing with meaning and stuff, but have you considered, or has your relationship to the infinite or to being, come to bear for you, or is it more about just finding the human meaning with your friends and family and work?
My relationship with being, yeah, definitely. My relationship with the infinite, yeah, I'm not sure. I can claim to have invested a huge amount of time in thinking about that. But my relationship with being, yes. One of the reasons I wanted to talk to you is because I kind of and show my face and so forth is to talk about truth and the importance of truth, because there might be other people watching this who are, I don't know, they might be in my situation or they might be in a similar situation, which is bad. I mean, I know somebody who's just lost the use of her arm, which is devastating. It's devastating. She's not facing my situation, but it's like, God, you wouldn't, it's a lot to go through. So maybe just by talking truthfully about stuff normally and truthfully, that can help. It's interesting that some people fall apart. Some people avoid you. You tell them what's happening and they don't know. And it doesn't come from a bad, they're not betraying you. They just have no idea what to do. They have no idea what to do. And so you just have to kind of forgive that and say, yeah, you know, kind of feel for you. I want to say things about, say things that it's not that I couldn't say, it's say things that I didn't say because I believe them to be true, because I think that that will probably help people, you know?
Such as what?
Okay. With the boys, so I met these boys' parents and they kind of gave me their perspective. They felt very much as though they couldn't speak. And so I saw it as kind of my job to articulate their arguments. I've come to the view that this whole thing is much more sexual for the boys. I'm not saying it's not for the girls. I'm saying I don't know. I know a lot less. It's much more sexual, and the grooming is way more important than we give it credit. Way more important. One of the reasons I chose to be anonymous, partly it's because I, did want to go back into academia, but that was only part of it. I spent somewhere between 15 and 20 years as an online paedophile hunter. And that's another thing I wouldn't have said if I hadn't got this health situation now. And the reason I mention it is because they're the same guys. They're the same guys now. What they're doing is they're just doing it in the open and saying gender. They are the same guys.
So you're like double O pedo hunter? Or am I child sex? What's the department that you were working? Was this just like a vigilanteism? This is fascinating.
Well, no, because that implies leaving the house. I never left the house. Vigilantism implies breaking the law and leaving the house. And no, I was very psychologically disturbed when I was very young, and I was groomed. And then the way I responded to that, which I don't know how unusual this is, but it kind of makes sense in hindsight, is having been groomed, is I then, starting about the age of 16, started going after groomers. Because you're angry, right? You're angry with yourself if you get yourself groomed. And so then you lash out. And it was entirely solitary, and it was entirely based at the computer, but it changed over the years.
Mm-hmm.
But at the beginning, it was pretty vindictive, what I was doing. I wasn't nice. And I never thought I would tell anyone about this. But then when I saw the gender stuff, they're the same guys. they are the same men.
Okay, so speaking technically, well,
Mhm.
not technically, but procedurally,
Uh-huh.
what do? You identify the behavior, and then you do things about that behavior. But how do you identify the behavior? How do you locate a groomer in an online space? Right?
Well, it started
Phishing activity or something?
it started when I was young enough to be of interest to and it was sadistic men that was the red rag to my bull.
Okay.
And it started when I was like 16. So I was the object of interest. And then I would do things like send chat scripts to the guy's wife or business. It was pretty vindictive at the beginning. And I had back then I had a it was very compulsive. It was very compulsive, and I had a need for. I really needed them to know that it's me who's brought you down. Like there had to be some big grand moment of like I am the one who has da 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 da. And then it kind of over the years changed. Some of it was really mundane. Some of it was just like this compulsive, obsessive habit of staying up till 4 o'clock in the morning, just report, stuff like that. Two men went to prison because of me. Both your fellow countrymen, which is a statement about nothing other than that you're from a big country. And then a lot of the time what I was doing, it wouldn't land, if you know what I mean by that. Like it didn't, I screwed it up in some way.
Mm-hmm.
Um, which led me to become kind of quite a paranoid private person, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways,
Well,
yeah.
you're engaged in war.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I never had it was never conscious because it is like it developed out of being groomed. And then this fury that I don't have words to describe the depth of at the groomer. But he was gone. So then like, where does this fury go? And it went, and it went, and it went, and it went.
Hmm.
Um, and now they're just open about it. Now they're just like, hey, it's really common to have, you can see this on Reddit, you don't even need an account. It's really common to have genital dysphoria. It's a condition, it probably means you're trans. You shouldn't feel bad about wanting to take a staple gun to your scrotum, but I'll watch just so you're safe. And I'm like, I see you. You're the same people 10 years ago, but now you can just say, oh, but you have gender dysphoria and I'm helping you. And they're there. They're in plain sight. So these men who were so furtive, and the older I got, the less like when I was young, you could argue I was kind of entrapping them, right? When I was 16 or 17. But obviously that didn't work into my 20s. Um, so it was really difficult to get information. And they were really cagey, these men. They're usually quite intelligent. And they were really cagey. They were really like frightened and furtive. And now it's just like they don't even bother hiding. And I think one of the reasons I want to talk about this is because there's a lot of naivety. These people, like I've spoken to people where there's some glitter family, there's some older influence, older male influence. And I'm like, okay, what's the nature of that? Is it sexual? And the parents like, I don't know. And I'm kind of thinking, oh, really? Because I feel like I do. I feel like I know. And I feel like an awful lot of this is a whole bunch more sexual and specifically sadomasochistic. And I say that from a position of somebody who was groomed, who was a very traumatized child and was groomed, and then came into contact with many hundreds of men like this. Not face to face, never face to face contact,
Hmm.
but never in person contact. So
What's
I know
your
what I'm talking about.
what's your nonce body count?
That's
That
my what?
Outland. Nonce body count. I was trying to use the British term.
I thought you said nonce. I thought you said non-spot account. Um,
Out damn
well, I
spot.
don't know. That's the thing because the thing is, Benjamin, I was alone. I was chaotic. I was
Yeah.
compulsive.
Yeah.
I was disorganized. I wasn't like engaged in some operation where there was like a spreadsheet. Like I'm gonna.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is that when they got away, if I went for somebody like a bad like I went for the bad guys, and you go into some dark places. Like I went for like one guy I went for was a necrophile. I went for like another guy who had a thing about trying to talk young men 14, 15, 16, whatever, into fetishizing limb removal. Like these are nasty people. And when I went for somebody and it didn't land, whatever it is I did, like at the beginning it would have been more like humiliating them in some childish way, and then towards the end it was more like, okay, I'm going to give this information to your local police department. I did a lot of that. um if it didn't land, I would just fall into like a 6 to 8 month deep depression.
Hmm.
Deep depression.
Hmm.
Like, so that happened 3 times. So
How did
yeah.
you get out of that cycle of behavior?
Well, it kind of just fell away. It turned into this very mundane, like click and report, click and report, click and report
Hmm.
stuff. Because I realized I can't keep doing this to myself. I can't wake up and the first thing is like, person, he's still out, it's not healthy. I can't say I regret what I did. Because two men went to prison. One of them, by the way, for assault and battery of a child in his home, and among other charges. So I can't possibly, in all good conscience, say I regret it, but it's not the right thing to do. And um, so I, and it just led me to have half a life so much of the time, you know? Um, and I don't even know what we're going to do. This is where I get a bit black pilled, because it's like I just genuinely don't know what parents are supposed to do. Maybe it's just as simple as you can't have the internet until you're 18. I mean, I really mean that. I don't know, because now it's like they're everywhere. They are everywhere, these men, you know? It's supposedly 1 to 2% of the population, of the male population, are pedophiles. So I'm using that in the broad sense to include hebephiles. Um, so you think, okay, well, how many men are there, and how many adult men are there on the planet? It's got to be 3 billion, 3 and a bit billion. How many of them have internet connections? I don't know, half. So then you get to like, what, 15, 30 million pedophiles with internet connections. And you and I know that the dumbest 50-year-old can pull off pretending to be 15, and the smartest 15-year-old can't tell somebody who's trying to do that. Um, and all of these kids now have been told, well, you know yourself, you know what's in your own best. No, you don't. You have no idea what's in your best interest. Because I started down this path at a very young age. And like I say, I can't say I regret it, because it is what it is. But it's not good to be in that kind of company. And all of these young people who are hanging around in these affirming spaces and talking about these radical changes to their bodies, they don't know they don't know who's getting off on that is the really simple way to put it. They don't know what they're turning themselves, they're objectifying themselves. Um, that's before you even look at some of the other stuff which is going on into the guys, which I would know a bit less about, like prostitution. You know, there's I think it's emerging that a lot of these of the young gay men who transition, there's a component there of prostitution, or certainly like wobbly financial relationships, which are going to make it very, very difficult for you to have faith that the person you're with has your best interests at heart. Um, so it comes back to, you said what's the role of men. I'd like to think part of the role of men is pointing at male sexual deviant behavior, and at the very least saying that's what that is, whether it's in that school in Brampton, Ontario, or whether it's online, and not falling for this um just this kind of rainbow washing, um and calling out other men who do and say, no, 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 you're a man, you know what that is. You know what that is. You know that if you're a man in your 40s and you're talking to a 13-year-old girl who's not your relative about sex, and you're not a doctor, there's so few contexts where that's okay. And there are even fewer where that's okay and the parent shouldn't be there. And we should just be saying it. We should just be saying it. You know? I am obsessed with Libs of TikTok. I think what Libs of TikTok is doing is incredible, brilliant. And I wish there were a Libs of TikTok for, I mean, it'd probably be instantly deleted, but
Oh yeah,
but
no.
like for the grooming, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, you can't even.
Probably somebody's tried that and it's just been instantly like, because
Yeah,
they'll just say, oh well, that's adult, and it's like, yeah, that's the point.
yeah, yeah. I think Matt Christensen, he's another YouTube creator. He did a show, or in his live stream, he showed that uh, the dude up in Canada with the enormous knockers, fake silicone ones, and the story got deleted as being sexual, sexually explicit, and it's like, well, that's the point. So Matt went full. You're calling this transphobic on Twitter against YouTube, but the ratchet swings in one direction, and I don't know. It's frustrating because the biggest tyrants, the biggest fascists on the platform are these activists who have transitioned and then get everybody else kicked off. And if you even engage with them, they'll get you kicked off. They have an enormous amount of power. There's no symmetry at all in this war.
No, there's no symmetry, but I'll tell you what there is. Like now, suddenly I'm Mr. White Pill. There are honest people in police departments, because a lot of what I would do towards the end, I would phone a detective. I'd be like, I would find a local detective who was on a child exploitation team, and I would phone them and I would say, hi, here I am. My name's Alistair. I've come across this. Can I email this to you? And they're nearly all honest people, and they're not captured. They won't go, oh, I don't know, it's about trans. If they'll be like, oh, this adult is trying to encourage this minor to self-harm. Okay, thanks very much for telling us. This looks like something we would definitely be interested in. Thanks very much.
Mm-hmm.
So, now I don't want to recommend people do that, because I don't want to ultimately, people who are confronted with this kind of behavior should have access to a psychologist, should have access to support. I'm vigilantism is wrong. It's wrong for yourself. So I wouldn't want to encourage anyone to do anything like that. But I'm merely making the point that it's like, all is not lost. There are lots of ordinary people, and some of those will be in schools as well, and they'll be in social services departments, and they'll be in hospitals and whatever, where if you just kind of explain what's going on, they will see it. It's not all been taken over by the blue-haired people yet,
Hmm.
you know?
There was this. Did you get kicked off Twitter? You're not on that platform no more. There was this
I know, no, I didn't
video
get kicked off.
circulating.
I'm not on it.
Two dads confronted a man in a dress that was gonna pick up one of their 13-year-olds and kiss her, and they have this extended conversation where the guy in the dress who is he's just, well, what are you going to do about it? Like, what's wrong with that? You know, I wouldn't force her to have sex with me. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. And he was just so chill about it, right? And there is no, how do we say it, wood chipper option, right? There's no longer that.
That's brave. I hope YouTube lets that through. Well, well, you wonder because at some point somebody might snap if that kind of behavior is normalized. I mean, if that's going on across societies and people are hearing more and more about that, and then it happens to them, who knows? How somebody will snap someday. Um, yeah, well, and there's a really important point here, which is we need to deal with this now because the more time goes on, and I think, to be honest, I think in America, I think it's too late for gay people because one of the things that sort of got me interested in this is like I've said this to you before, we're going to be blamed because LGBT is everywhere, LGBT, 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 and people will just go, okay, yeah, you're the people, you're the reason my niece doesn't have breasts anymore, and I kind of felt like there's not much time to stop that. And I now genuinely wonder, is it too late? I don't know, but I think there's going to be a backlash led by politicians and they will say LGBT, they won't say gender, they won't say queer, they won't say grooming, they won't pick up on the nuance. They'll just go for that term. In America, I think it would be different in Britain and Ireland. But I think there's going to be, I think it's difficult to see a way around this without a huge backlash now.
Hmm.
I think.
I don't know. I don't know.
Well, if there isn't a huge backlash, it'll partly be your doing. Do you know what I mean? Because it's about holding the line and not just doing the ratchet in the other direction and going like, which yeah. So I don't know. It's difficult to see where America goes, which I never expected to say, and it makes me very sad to say that. It's kind of extraordinary what's happened with the death of Elizabeth II. And then there was those couple of comments, one from a law professor, both American women, like I hope it hurt, that stuff. And you could feel it. You could feel all of the Republican in the British sense, so non-monarchist, centrist, reasonable people whose viewpoint would have been, I really like the Queen. I do think there should probably be a debate when she dies, because frankly, I'm not massively on board with monarchism, and you could feel it. You could feel them. Like over there, there's the horsey-faced aristocrats, and over there's the screeching blue-haired American social justice people, and you could feel people going, oh, just go stand near the horsey-faced aristocrats because the American left is now so toxic that it's destroyed British republicanism, which would historically be seen as left-wing. It would be historically seen as left-wing to be a Republican in Britain, and now there's no energy, there's no creative energy behind republicanism in Britain. That their campaign message was hashtag not my king. That's disastrous. Like they should have said hashtag can't top this with a picture of Queen Elizabeth or hashtag end on a high note. That would be, any good branding agency would have told them, no, you need to be positive about this very well-loved woman. And there's no creative energy in republicanism at all because it's too near the North American left, and it just, you can feel people just go, ugh, and move away. Yeah, I never expected that.
constitutional monarchism with some sort of tied together with the church. I mean, that's what you're looking at.
Yeah, well, yeah, and I would be somebody who's a big fan of the Queen, and I would also be somebody who's a big fan of having a conversation about lots of different ways that you can have a government of a country. It's not just that you're America or you're Britain, and we've lost the opportunity to talk about that because it just because the left destroys everything at the minute. So it's just like I can't even be bothered. Fine, yeah, God save the king. Fine, great.
Well, as long as the king isn't in the pocket of Davos and the WEF, the globalists, right?
Right, because that could never happen.
Don't know.
Yeah, I mean, there's more to it than that. I think there's also an outwelling of support for somebody whose mum has just died, and so
Yeah.
it's not just political stuff, right? There's more to it than
Yeah.
that. Yeah, but
Hmm.
there's definitely something in that now that you can feel. And when you watch the kind of the British left, like the young British kind of Corbynite left now, softly they're starting to try and just triangulate a little bit away from what's going on in North America. They're kind of trying to talk about different cultural contexts and stuff, so that just so they can get out of it, so they can get out of the trenches.
Yeah. The circular firing squad, purity
The
spirals.
circular trench, yeah, it's just a circular trench, and people get pushed up over the top, and there's just a mound of bodies in the middle. Yeah, and people just kind of you can see that happening. Um, so yeah, yeah, and it's also, I mean, I think it's also interesting that who our new prime minister is, because that's relevant to the gender stuff.
Who is it?
She's called Liz Truss, and she's basically gender critical. Basically,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what that means yet
Does
in terms of,
she's got interesting amounts of power over there. They can hire and fire anybody that they want, right? The prime minister has a lot of executive authority over personnel and other parliamentary members or something like that.
yeah. I don't know about within the civil service, but in terms of her cabinet, yeah. But obviously, you can only do so much with that because you start to look unstable if
Mm.
you're hiring and firing and hiring and firing the whole time, right? You don't want to look like who was that guy, Scaramucci? Like you don't want to look like it's kind of revolving door. Um, but I think there's nobody wants to say it out loud, but with the stuff around medicalization and gender, there is a feeling that in the UK it's all over bar the shooting. We're just kind of waiting for the legislation to kind of start to come in and
It's an interesting state. I have an interview with Susan and Marcus Evans dropping soon. We don't get into it too much, but the Tavistock closing isn't really the Tavistock closing. It's just that gender aspect of it is going to be
just the dudes.
put somewhere else. There's already like a 5, 6, 10 year waiting list to be seen. And then there's the youth and then the adult services, and there's no plan in place for it to be established somewhere else. And that takes a long time to put in place. So it's kind of this weird game of stalling it out. It looks like they could be playing, or it
Which
could just be
is
total bureaucratic incompetence, which I wouldn't put it past bureaucracies to be totally incompetent.
And it could also be option one masquerading as option two. And this country, which I sit in now, despite the fact I'm not Irish, I'm in Ireland, is has adopted a pretty, well, I don't know, people might take an issue with this, but there is a feeling that the Irish view is, yeah, we're so on board with this. Oh, what a pity that it's a 17-year waiting list. Well, gee and shucks. And
Hmm.
you know, and actually behind the scenes, people are saying just stall, 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 stall,
Hmm.
because medicalization of young people, it happens in this country, but it's very, 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 very sluggish. Um, so I don't know what the plan is with the JIDs. Certainly, part of the cast review, which is what led to the breakup of the JID, or to the closing down of the JIDs, part of the cast review is to say, listen, you don't get to do medicine in a silo in a fiefdom anymore. You don't get to do that. You have to talk to the eating disordered people, and you actually have to talk to them. You can't just say, "Oh, well, that's got nothing to do with gender." No, and ditto with all of the stuff around neurodivergence, whatever that might mean. And so, getting rid of the siloed healthcare is
Hmm.
a big thing, particularly because healthcare is very centralized in the UK.
Hmm. I heard stories about the leaders or the heads of JIDs, and it sounds like something that Graham Linehan should have been doing a sitcom about, because they're all a bunch of these eccentric people who kind of rule by this passive aggressive authority where it's really difficult to
I
work with
hope he
them if you're
gets
not on
it.
board.
That would be amazing if he did that at some point. Um, yeah, well, I do think it's certainly developed in a very abnormal way within the UK healthcare system.
Mhm.
And I think that one of the things about the American system is it's probably a lot easier to run something as a kind of fiefdom, right? Because it's a private. So you can just say, well, listen, if you don't like it, you don't have to come, which is, you know, legitimate as a piece of logic. Um,
Hmm.
but I'm also, there's more to life than the UK and the US health system. So I don't have health insurance. Do you want to know how much I've just paid for everything we've just discussed, including 5 days in acute cardiac care, abdominal surgery, 4 days of recovery from that, stoma care because I have a stoma, so all of the materials to for the stoma, sprays and bags and belts and doctor's appointments, the whole thing, right? No health insurance, and Ireland does not have an NHS. About 1,200,
$1,200 million.
1,200 euros.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's staggeringly small.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I think British people talk themselves into thinking, well, it's like, well, you either have the NHS or you live in America, where you will be.
Hmm.
And Americans talk themselves into like, well, you either have the American system or you have the NHS, where you have to wait like 517 years for a hip replacement. And actually, there's so many healthcare models in the healthcare
Hmm.
I've received, with the exception of one known issue, which is a department which is in chaos and is known to be in chaos in this country.
Hmm.
Other than that, it's been incredible. It's been so good.
Hmm.
And
Was
I
the
tell Americans, and they're like, "How much is this costing you?" And I'm like, 1,200 euros so far. Like,
hmm.
you know, and it must be very scary for people who. Now, I know a lot of Americans would say, yeah, but Americans have health insurance. But I think if you didn't,
Mhm.
I don't know, it must be scary.
There's a lot of moving parts, and there's a lot of economic differences between my country and your country. And you guys are gonna.
Yeah, and there's also another argument, which is a lot of the research is done in America, and a lot of that research is paid for by your insurance premiums and not by us overseas, but we benefit from
Mm,
some of that. So
mm,
it's not necessarily fair towards you to pretend like you just have this rapacious oligarchical system, which for some reason you can't get rid of. I think
mm.
it's more complicated.
Yeah,
Than,
kind of.
yeah.
While still being a not the most efficient system ever to be founded.
So I'll tell you something which I found kind of bittersweet, which is so the care I received was amazing, with the exception of one place, which I'm going to name. I'm happy to name because it's a matter of public record, and this is an ongoing thing, which is Limerick ER. so the ER in Limerick. The ER in Limerick is known to have been, it's a massive problem. I didn't know this because it's not actually that close. They closed down our local hospital. They turned it into a cottage hospital, like just a day treatment centre. And so Limerick functions as the kind of regional hub for the whole west of Ireland, basically, like a large part of the west of Ireland. So Limerick Hospital is known for having a really catastrophic emergency department. It's really catastrophic because there are too many people coming in from too many places because they closed down too many regional hospitals. So I went in, and this was the only bad part of my care. They told me I would have to wait on a trolley at the edge of a corridor for 5 nights before I would be seen. Yeah.
5 nights?
So 5 nights.
Okay. But it's just 50 cents a night to sleep on this gurney, right?
It's the worst. It's the only bad aspect of the care I received, but it's known to be, this is huge. It's been in the, I didn't know this because I don't live in Limerick, but it's been in the local papers. There have been various politicians involved, blah, blah, blah. But here's the kicker, right? I didn't know I had cancer, but what I did know is all I wanted to do was take my underwear off because I was incredibly distended.
Mm.
And at this point, I'd been in for 48 hours, so I probably wasn't smelling too pretty. And I was on the edge of the corridor, and there were 15 people there, including all ages, both sexes. And we were so closely stacked that my feet were all, now I'm a very tall man, I'm 6'5", but my feet were almost touching the guy in front of me because they just sardined you in. And so I couldn't take my underwear off because there were women. There were 2 elderly women. And like I had this little thin sheet and I'd been sedated. So it's like, so I'll go to sleep and then I'll roll over and everyone will see I'm not going to take my underwear off in a space where there are women. I'm not, I mean, if they're healthcare professionals, fine, but not just random civilians. And then it kind of occurred to me, like, where are you, feminist Twitter? Because every day in Limerick emergency room, that happens every day. This is a known problem going back, I think I'm correct in saying 5 years. I didn't know about it. Every day there are elderly women. There was a drug dealer who was, I don't know, 35 or whatever. He was actually really funny because he was trying to get morphine out of the doctors, and he was so hammy. He was like, the burning pain of it. I just need the morphine. Just give me the morphine. Give me the morphine. And then as soon as the doctor left, he was going through the little drawers, like in the lost property thing, looking for morphine. So, but it's like, and then like 20 meters away, there's like a woman who's in her 70s. And then there's me in between the two thinking, all I want to do is take my underwear off. Now, if I had sent out a tweet from an anonymous account saying, I'm in Limerick General Hospital and there's a trans woman on a female ward, they would have been there like that. It would have been outside Limerick General Hospital saying, this is disgusting. Women have a right to a sex-segregated space, which I agree with. Women have a right to a sex-segregated space. I don't think that male to female transsexuals should be in female wards. I don't have an easy answer, but that's what I think. So it just kind of gave me some perspective, having spent all that time in the gender debate, and it's so fraught and stuff. And then you're like, holy cow, every day there are women sharing space, not just women, but elderly women sharing a space with not just men, but young, fit, often jonesing men. Mm-hmm. And a small space, like that corridor was 2 meters wide, if that.
48 hours, though. That's insane.
Well, I escaped. I was supposed to stay 5 days, and I phoned my doctor and I said, I can't do this. And my doctor said, my medical advice to you is to stay, and my human advice to you is get the F out, because you just need to. So I just stayed for long enough to have a CAT scan. And then it's like, I left. I just left. But it's a known problem in this country. It's just that one department. And I feel kind of obliged to say literally every single person that I've met, from nurses to oncologists to consultants to doctors to surgeons to people bringing tea and toast have all been just amazing. It's a structural problem. And the chief executive officer of Limerick General Hospital, Colette Gowan, needs to sort that out. Yeah. But the rest of the care has been incredible. Yeah. But it really, it was funny. It just gave me perspective on that whole male-female thing that you do think we're all in our echo chambers, and people get so hung up, and they're right about the invasion of women's spaces by people who by males who have transitioned. But it's like there's a world out there of stuff going on that pertains to protecting women, and it's not all about trans women. It's not all about trans. That's a very, very simple mechanical issue to do with bed management, which has just been going on and on and on and on and on for years because of one person's intransigence, basically.
The Limerick ER.
The Limerick ER, yeah.
I can't do it right now, but I want to do it. There once was a gurney in Limerick.
You're not going to try and
Oh, no.
make limericks up.
You had 48 hours. You didn't come up with a single.
I was drugged. Well, and the other thing
That's an excuse. That's not poetry.
The other thing about Limerick ER is because of a bunch of factors, social factors and socioeconomic factors, it's like it's some of the poorest people in Ireland, and it's some of the most disenfranchised people in Ireland. Huge levels of alcoholism. So basically, if you go to Limerick ER, they kind of treat you as an alcoholic until proven otherwise. And in fairness, if I were in their position, I would probably be doing the same, because probably about 60% of the people they see are there with maybe not alcohol, but some kind of alcohol and drug thing. So once you get through that and you get to see a consultant, you're flying.
Talking about gatekeeping.
Yeah, it's a massive problem. Yeah, it's a bottleneck, and it's also because of people like, that guy I said where I kind of wanted to offer to wheel him out of the window, because again, I don't want to say anything that would identify him, but he had been in that ward. So that was when I was on the ward. That was when I got out of the ER and I was on the ward. He'd been in that bed for half a year.
Oh, geez. Okay.
And he needs to be in care in the community. He needs to be in a nursing home.
Yeah.
And it kind of, and it's like, so how many people are there down on that, men and women down on that corridor, who are stuck on that corridor because of people? I mean, the term they use, it's not a nice term, but it's an accurate term, is bed blocking. It's elderly people who just don't want to go home, Which I get, because it's scary.
Yeah. So you said that you're avoiding stress, but you decided to speak with me. So let's check in with your stress level. Are you? Has this been a good time for you? Are you?
Oh yeah.
You hydrated and chill? Is your resting heart rate at a reasonable?
I don't know. My phone refuses to. Apparently, if I put my finger on the back of my phone, it should measure my heart rate, but it refuses. No, I'm grand. I'm not. I don't think. What happened to me was that the chemotherapy, it didn't give me a heart attack. I probably would have had a heart attack in like 15 years or whatever, but it was the chemotherapy. So I'm not at a risk of a heart attack for, like, you can shout boo or whatever, and I'm not going to keel over. So it's not that kind of situation. Do you know what I mean? It's more life limiting in the sense that it potentially narrows the range of treatments available to me. Um,
But other than guest appearances such as this, what are your plans looking forward with regard to being public and speaking more about this? There's only so much we can cover in a single episode, right?
right. I don't know. Um, I mean, if people want to, the people can email me if they want to talk to me. I would like to talk about the grooming stuff, even though a lot of me doesn't want to, because it's kind of revisiting some stuff in my own past. But I kind of feel like I've made a decision. No, I'm gonna say these things a bit more openly. Um, I don't know who wants to have that conversation, to be honest. And you're a very unique interviewer and you're a very good interviewer. And so I felt very safe talking to you. But I mean, yeah, I don't really know what my plans are. I don't know if I'm going to write. I don't know if I'm going to speak. I think I'm just going to take it handy and see what, if anything, comes my way.
Mm-hmm. Taking it handy with Angus Fox, nonce hunter.
Yeah. And
There was a
it's
few
just
surprises.
it's
There was a
great.
few surprises in this conversation. You threw
Oh
me.
no, I was very. I almost wanted to say to you at the beginning, like I'm kind of aware that this could come across as totally mental, and it could be like he's just lost his mind. He's just making it up. Um, but it all
Mm,
makes sense just because I've spent so long
mm,
now
mm,
this year, like as I say, in bed thinking, what am I going to do? What do I want to do? And the thing that I did for so many years that was a secret life. I mean, I was with a guy for 7 years who still doesn't know that I was doing that, and that was like at the peak.
mm.
The peak. Um,
Hmm.
I don't know who. I don't know who wants to talk about that or wants to hear about that, but I definitely know that there are people who need to, whether they can stomach it or not.
Mhm.
I spoke because I knew I'd be talking to you. I contacted one of the mothers I know whose son was like the worst example of grooming that I've come across with the trans stuff. Bad, 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 bad. And said to her, I know this is a painful question, but I'm going to ask anyway, what would you do differently? And she said, no internet. Just no internet. Just wouldn't have had the internet. And she said, even there, it's like you don't know because the friend can give them an internet ready device. Like, do you know what I mean? But that's the minimum I would have done. And I think having been groomed myself, having sought that out at that very vulnerable age and kind of gone through the process of kind of forgiving myself for that, and then having gone into whatever it was I did all those years. Um, I do worry that it's just too much and people just don't want to hear it. Parents just don't want to hear it. It's kind of like thinking about like fire insurance or thinking about like,
Mm,
oh God, my child might have leukemia or something.
mm.
Is it too much? Is it just overload now? What we're asking parents to do? I don't know. But I also know that this situation is getting worse and worse and worse and worse. And it was bad. But now it's like mind-blowingly bad. Um,
So
so
what
I
is?
hope there is somebody who wants to listen, and I hope there's somebody who has an idea of what to do.
Yeah. Well, speaking of what to do, so beyond not internet, what about identification of behaviors? You said sadistic behaviors and manipulative behaviors. I mean,
Well,
there's
yeah,
got
and
to be a
then you should
psychological
ask.
profile that you've kind of come up with in your head.
Oh yeah, well usually, I mean, it would depend. It was a lot easier when I started because I would have been about 16 and you are what they are looking for physically, so that kind of does itself. But then out of that, as I kind of went on and that stopped working, and yet I still had the compulsive need to do this. I suppose I realized most of them are narcissists, and the way it's quite easy to deal with narcissists, you just tell them what they want to hear, right? And usually things flow from that.
Hmm.
What caused me immense pain and depression and was the clever ones who I couldn't get, who I could name for you,
Hmm.
and who well, a big part of why I chose to be anonymous because, like, look, I really went for people, and they deserved it. I'm not going to mess around with that, but from their perspective, like, there's a good few people out there who don't like me. Whereas now I'm like, well, what are you going to do to me? Like, are you going to give me a tumor or are you going to give me a heart attack? Because I can take both. Like, bring it. What are you going to do to me? I don't have I don't have the same priorities. So whatever people might say, I don't know. Who cares?
Well, yeah. So I guess there's justice, but that is draining. There's also wisdom that you can impart, that other people can pick up the mantle or develop safeguards, or get a little bit more street smart on the internet with what's going on in these communities.
Yeah, but it's going to need something bigger than that, isn't it?
Hmm.
It's going to need something a lot bigger than that.
We keep
And
on
I
going
hope,
back from black pill to white pill to black pill to white pill.
well, I just hope it isn't something really, really awful. Like I hope it doesn't involve, some. I don't even want to say it out loud, but like some horrible human tragedy is what it takes to actually deal with this.
Mm.
And those human tragedies they're already happening. It's just we're not really seeing them, or only certain people are seeing them. Um, I think there needs to be a political movement which unapologetically puts parents' views front and center, but that has the nous to do that in a non-extreme centrist way, which is like, we have people they might be gay, they might be straight but childless, who are allies. We join with them, blah, blah, blah. There just needs to be something which looks non-crazy, non-apocalyptic, but recognizes there is a huge scale problem here. The tech companies, there are different viewpoints. Can't, won't do anything about it. Whichever it is, there are different viewpoints. I actually tend to think it's more of the can't than the won't. And people might not like that and might say I'm making excuses for them. But I just think the mechanics of, like, how do you even, I don't know. I don't know what tools they have at their disposal, but there's going to have to be
If they
some
can
kind of
fortify an
reappraisal.
election, though, they can. I'm just kidding, but if they can target political speech,
Mm. I'm from a country where we have this terribly old-fashioned habit of voting on paper and counting it on the same night, and I have to say I do recommend it quite strongly. Um, yeah, I don't know. I tend to think there's going to have to be some kind of political movement which does a big reappraisal of this is the nature of the relationship between the parent and the child. This is the proper place of the teacher. This is the proper place of the external adult, and which is prepared to look at somebody who says, I'm your glitter mom. If your parents don't accept your non-binary, I will. And just be honest and say, Grimmer, that's sexual. That's sexual. Because you're talking to a child about sex. That's sexual. You know, I'm not saying that person should be physically threatened, but then the onus is on them to explain, why are you talking to a strange child about sex? Why are you doing that? I wouldn't talk to my partner's nieces or nephews about sex without talking to the their parents first, his brother and his sister-in-law. I would absolutely go to them and say, listen, I mean, I don't even know what context I would want to, but you know what I mean. Um, I don't know who the person is to do that, but I think it's going to have to be broad. And I think, yeah, maybe it's Libs or TikTok. I'm kind of obsessed. I think if I was straight, I think what she's doing is incredible. I think it's incredible what she's doing.
Hmm.
I think if there's one person who could turn this whole thing around in America, it's Libs or TikTok.
Not if Taylor Lorenz takes her down. But I mean, Reddit banned groomer as a slur, right? So Reddit has gone on record. It's amazing how captured these places are. They go on, they side with the people who are siding with the people who are the groomers, like in a narrow sense.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and you can't do anything about it because like one logical thing to do would be a libs of TikTok but for grooming, where you would just screenshot and just put it up there, but it will go. I can tell you that there's no point doing it. It will go.
There's like a small, I think, TikTok trend where kids are like confronting pedophiles and filming the whole thing.
Yeah, but
That's dangerous.
yeah, that's really dangerous.
Super dangerous.
I never consciously put in place any structures, but just because of the way it worked, what I was because I was groomed, and then because I had such anger against the person who groomed me, that I went out to find similar people. So that was kind of narrow, right? So I never put myself in a position where I might see any kind of image, any kind of indecent image, and I never put myself in a position where I might meet somebody in person.
Hmm.
I it should what kind of a society are we where we're letting kids do that as a crusade? Like Jesus, you know?
I
It
don't,
shouldn't be up
I
to
don't like it.
kids to do that.
It's ballsy, but
It is ballsy, and I'm not gonna criticize them, but it's it's not exactly like if you were designing your society from scratch, you wouldn't exactly come up with that as a solution to this problem. What you would come up with is some kind of way of finding these men and protecting society from these men, and then yeah, maybe helping them if they can be helped. I'm slightly less bothered, but whatever.
hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah.
Angus, I think we should wrap it up, the recording section, at this point in time. Is there anything to end on? What should we end on? What does your hat symbolize? Is that a football team or
No,
something?
it's just Oakley. I have a very, very large head,
Okay.
and Oakley are the only people who make baseball caps that fit
Okay.
large-headed people.
All right. Cool. Pure
So I've got
practical.
6 different Oakley hats because I figured I got so bored of trying on baseball caps and then just sitting on top of my head like a tiny little tiara, like hello. It was very nice to talk to you, and thank you for. I know there was a lot in that, so yeah.
Man alive.
I hope I didn't upset you.
Oh no, I need to be upset and catch it on camera. It's good for the clicks, right? Just like selling my soul, right?
Well,
Performing empathy.
there's something about being having an authentic reaction, isn't there?
Yeah.
But
It's heavy stuff, though.
huh?
It's heavy stuff, and thank you for sharing. I think it's one of the core aspects to humanity, our mortality, that it's very difficult to look at and to witness. But it's just as built into what we are as sex and birth and puberty and all the other aspects of it.
Well, and it might, it might help some people, and it might help me as well, um, you know, because there's a lot for me to process. But
Yeah.
I've done surprisingly well. I'm very, very, very well supported. I'm very lucky.
Mm.
I've got friends. I've got good friends. I've got a wonderful partner. I've got a good family.
Yeah, Stella.
I've got Stella. Stella's been an angel. I only saw her yesterday, and she's been kind of, like taking me out to lunch, and yeah. Um, and it's kind of the opposite because, like, how I said, like, some people go weird, and she's the opposite. She's not at all weird. She's completely able to have really open conversations about it, which is really useful because you need to process things. And you can't process something if somebody's crying for you. Like, just shut up. You need to stop crying for me. Like, go and do that elsewhere. I need to have a think here. Whereas she wouldn't be like that at all. No.
She's probably got like this tiny little closet where she goes to weep whenever she needs to. That's well insulated.
Well, she's a very extraordinary person, and I think in many ways, I do think that the success of what she's done it's bound up with her personality, and that's true of lots of different people actually in this area. That there's not terribly normal people, but really phenomenally capable. Some of the people I've met the last 2 years is just like, wow, you're kind of mind-blowing people. Um, so yeah, yeah. Well, if you'd like to have me back on, I'm not doing much.
Okay. Yeah, I think that there's a lot of, even though like this is a 3 hour conversation, I think there's a lot of avenues to explore and to
Problem.
concentrate on and to check in. And plus your great company. Who we did with Claire Graham and you.
Claire.
We
Well, there's
triangulated.
loads of people there. There's Claire, and I'd love to. I haven't spoken to Claire for ages, and Sinead and Richie are both doing quite a lot of video, and I know Richie pretty well, and I know
Oh,
Sinead
really?
pretty well.
Okay.
Oh yeah, yeah. I know Corinna very well
Yeah,
now.
Corinna's a
Corinna
doll.
and I, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Corinna's a doll. A lovely person.
Yes, yeah. We have very interesting. When we disagree, we really disagree.
Huh.
We really disagree when we disagree. We're kind of in a, I don't know, ongoing disputes about various things. But yeah, yeah, a lovely person. So I don't know. I'm kind of almost becoming like honorary transy detransy kind of. Do you know what I mean?
What do
Like
you mean by that?
honorary detrans or something. Like I seem to fit into that character group almost.
Huh.
Yeah.
Who knows what that's about? Well, maybe on the 29th or the 30th, if you're free, you can join me and Richie and Sinead.
That'd be lovely.
We're setting up a
29th or the
co-hub.
30th of September.
Yeah, end of the month. I'll check in with
That
you.
would,
We can.
that would be great. That's the day before. That's the day before Freedom Day,
Oh
1st of
no.
October.
What happens on
Freedom Day.
Freedom Day? You guys.
On Freedom Day, I can eat spicy food, sugary food, rich food. I can drink booze. I can drive. I can orgasm, and I can do exercise. Freedom.
I thought it was national holiday, but it's just a
And I'm
glorious
going to do them all at once.
event
They're
of
all going to be done
hedonism.
at the same time. I'm going to be in the car,
Oh no.
buying fried food, some coffee, lifting some weights.
Don't say it. Don't say it. Okay, it's all implied.
It's all
Angus Fox. Well, do I have to stop calling you Angus Fox now? Do you have
no,
like
you can call me whatever. You can call me
new
Alistair.
pronouns
I
for
don't
you
mind.
in your new identity of a
Oh, you know what? Angus could be my pronoun.
yeah Angus? I don't know. Angus.
Well, presumably, yeah. No, I'd have to think about that. He, him.
Or just
Exactly.
Ang and Gus.
Let's not.
No, let's not. You have to throw that pronoun joke in there anyways. Well, thank you, friend, for the conversation.
Thank
I'm
you.
gonna end the recording now.
Okay.
Yeah, I can stop it there and see what happens. I spilled